Okay, this is going to be a little different than some of my other videos because I'm about to rant and read an article. So please bear with me. Oh great. So apparently there aren't enough people in the creative world telling you what to write, that there needs to be more. So if the traditional method of publishing hasn't been discouraging enough, what with all of the push for sensitivity readers telling you how you've written stuff poorly because that's not the way that they imagine those characters, or that character doesn't represent them as a person, then you've also got the own voice and the agents and publishers who are only looking to publish certain people from certain backgrounds who've had certain experiences, which is actually quite widespread, honestly, is what it seems every time I'm trying to look at what agents are looking for right now. Let me know if you've had a different experience in trying to query your book right now. But now there is this new thing that the Authors Guild published 2 days ago. This popped up on my Facebook feed in the writing group I'm in. And it's why we oppose moral clauses in book contracts. I didn't even know that this was something going on, but I can't say that I'm surprised. So let's go down here and see what they have to say. The Authors Guild objects to publishers' new and increasing use of so-called moral clauses. These contract provisions allow publishers to terminate book contracts and in many cases even require the author to repay portions of the advance already received if the author is accused of immoral, illegal, or publicly condemned behavior. So in a lot of worlds, you would think that this isn't a big problem, but stick with me on this and I'll tell you why this is an issue. Publishers insist they need the clause to protect themselves in the event an author's reputation becomes so tarnished after the book's contract is signed that it hurts sales. But most of these clauses are too broad and allow publishers to terminate based on individual accusations or vague notions of public condemnation, which can occur all too easily in these days of viral social media. So let's take a second. This feels very relevant due to the Covington boys in the recent news. So imagine that any of those boys, specifically Nick Sandmann, had a book deal for maybe just like a YA book about dragons, something completely unrelated to anything. And because of the most recent accusations where he didn't do anything, but because there was this outrage forced online by all of these media outlets who are lying about the story, because that happened, he would have lost his book deal. Anybody can whip up a media storm if they don't like your face. So imagine that you got a book deal for your romance series that's completely apolitical, it's completely anything, and maybe somebody somewhere saw you go to a rally that they didn't like. And then the leftist media comes in and just tarnishes your reputation. Maybe they saw you in Washington, D.C. and you went to a party that President Trump was giving, and then they just slander the crap out of you to the point that you lose your book deal. This is trying to control individuals' behavior with the book companies, the publishers, now deciding what is moral and what is not. You're not being removed. It includes illegal in there. But immoral, how are they determining what's immoral behavior? Would they cancel a book based on somebody cheating on their spouse? Is that the kind of immoral behavior that they're going to now grant who's being published and who's not being published? Because it's not really a publisher's job to decide if your life is moral or not. Are they going to stop publishing people who are alcoholics because alcoholism isn't immoral? Alcoholism is immoral. So will they stop publishing alcoholic authors? Are publishers going to start determining what is acceptable behavior? And if you don't fall into that behavior, well, now you're never going to get published. The ambiguity and subjectivity of these clauses make them ripe for abuse. Publishers should not have the sole discretion to decide whether accusations are true. That's another thing that this is going with, is you don't have to be convicted of anything. You never go through the court system. You don't even have to be guilty of what they're saying you did. If somebody, like with the Nick Sandmann case, if they said, well, you gave a mean look, well, you did this thing, you didn't actually have to do that thing. As long as enough people believe that you did that thing, now you're suddenly guilty of doing that thing, and you have now lost your publication. And this also goes, I feel like this, I need to look into when this started happening, But it makes me think of the Milo Yiannopoulos case a couple of years ago. What was it, 2016, when he was going to have his book Dangerous published with Simon and Schuster, but then after he got into this controversy pulled up on Twitter about him and Leslie Jones, and after so long, Simon and Schuster dumped him for publishing. But they didn't have this moral contract, as far as I know. They just decided, well, we're getting threats from these far leftists, including Roxane Gay, who is also being published by them, and she was demanding that they not they not publish him because he doesn't deserve a voice. I'm sorry, Roxane Gay, but I don't appreciate your content, but I still think that you should have your arguments be allowed to be in public. I still think that you should be able to make your arguments and people should be able to make arguments against you. I also think that publishers can publish things that they don't agree with. I also think that publishers and employers can work with people that they don't agree on everything with. I also think that family members and friends can coexist and actually be really close without agreeing on everything. I can agree with Carl Panzram that people are terrible, and if you want to create monsters, then you treat people poorly. Because the abuse cycle is real. You abuse a kid, they're likely to become abusive themselves when they're an adult. Not everyone can break out of that cycle. In fact, most people continually fall into that cycle, and it takes a special kind of person to break out of the cycle of abuse once they've been in it. I can agree with him on that. You destroy a person's character by beating them consistently. That doesn't mean I agree with everything that Carl Panzram did or believes. This is how you find common ground. This is how you create a community where beliefs are different. Is you understand that people can believe different things and you can agree partially. You don't have to agree on everything. And I feel like that's something that is really missing from a lot of the conversation, is it's believed that you have to agree with everything somebody does or everything somebody says, or else you're just out and you're a traitor. And you see this a lot in politics, where somebody says, oh, I agree with all of this stuff, but I don't like that, and then they get ousted. Let me know your thoughts on that. Publishers should not have the sole discretion to decide whether accusations are true, and if the accusations are not true, they should not subject the author to termination. Publishing houses should perform due diligence and determine whether the book and its author fit their objectives before entering into agreements. Broad moral clauses give publishers yet another unfair way out of the contract when they decide they don't want to publish a book for whatever reason. Something else that's really interesting about this for me is it mentions up top that publishers are allowed to cancel a publication deal if somebody did something illegal. But how many true crime books do we have? In fact, publishers and entertainment creators are so interested in particularly illegal things that New York and 40 other states created the Son of Sam law, so people who commit crimes can't profit off of their crimes by telling the story of their crimes. Publishers are less likely to cancel a deal on a Ted Bundy telling his story about killing people than they are about canceling somebody like Milo Yiannopoulos who says provocative things. Because they don't really see anything immoral or wrong about publishing the illegal, but they see something wrong with having the wrong thoughts. And this does more damage than just if you have political beliefs in your real life, and I'll show you what I mean in a second when we get to the bottom of this article. The moral conduct of an author is not germane to the author's fulfillment of obligation under the contract, nor should it be a basis for termination, much less returning the advance. The author's side of the bargain is to deliver the book promised in a timely manner, not to uphold an unspecified standard of behavior. Correct. When you sign a book deal, you're signing to have the book done to sell a product. You're not conforming to some behavioral doctrine that now you have to do this in order to succeed. This is ridiculous. What constitutes behavior, quote, subject to widespread public condemnation or moral turpitude, or similar terms used in these clauses, varies widely and often has as much to do with a nation's current socio-political climate as it does with its ethics. As playwright Lillian Hellman notably wrote in a response to a subpoena to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, which was investigating communist infiltration of Hollywood and other American institutions, quote, I cannot and will not cut my conscience to fit this year's fashions, unquote. Yet before McCarthyism came to an end in 1954, it destroyed the careers of thousands of writers, filmmakers, artists, academics, and other left-leaning intellectuals. In 1990, before the court declared it unconstitutional, the NEA, bowing to pressure for cultural conservatives, mandated that grant applicants had to sign obscenity pledges promising not to use public funds to create works of morally questionable nature. Now publishers apparently want the ability to terminate an author's contract for failing to predict how their words will be received by a changing public. This is a business risk like any other, yet publishers are attempting to lay it solely at authors' feet. Worst of all, moral clauses have a chilling effect on free speech. A writer at risk of losing a book deal is likely to refrain from voicing a controversial opinion or taking an unusual stance on an important issue. See, this is where it loses me, because it just goes, women writers and writers of color. Everybody is suffering from this. I just brought up 2 white men who would suffer from this clause, and it's not just those 2 that would. I am constantly in fear of my own publication abilities because of my opinions. The writing institutions, the traditional writing institutions, are heavily leaning to the left. And these mentalities are very religious in a way. Is you fit in and you agree with the doctrine, or you don't get involved. There are more than a dozen actors who have talked about the blacklisting in Hollywood if you shared a centrist or conservative opinion. And many of them didn't come out until they were comfortable financially, that they didn't have to worry about it. And I don't think that being a woman writer or a writer of color necessarily hurts you in any way. It's actually if you don't follow the moral doctrines. And this article saying, oh, well, women and writers of color are at the biggest risk is kind of proof to how left-leaning the writing community is. Down here, there are some samples of moral clauses. In the event that the author is publicly accused of the violation of law, the infringement of, or invasion of the rights of any third party, inciting the infringement or invasion of a third party rights by others, or is otherwise accused of libel, slander, or defamatory conduct, or any other conduct that subjects, or could be reasonably anticipated to subject, the author or publisher to ridicule, contempt, scorn, hatred, or censure by the general public, or which is likely to materially diminish the sales of the work, publisher may terminate. So this is what we really want to pay attention to, is anticipated to subject author or publisher to ridicule, contempt, scorn, hatred, or censure. Again, that goes back to the Milo Yiannopoulos thing, when all of these people were coming out and saying, we don't like Milo Yiannopoulos, don't publish him. How many other billions of books has Simon & Schuster sold? And it's not just left-wing or right-wing people, or left-wing people as this thing likes to claim, that are going to be censored. I've got this article saved, or this blog post saved, from 2 years ago now, about The Black Witch by Laurie Forrest. Now, I'm going to do a longer thing about this specifically, but the big thing with The Black Witch is it was called the most dangerous, offensive book I've ever read. It's racist, ableist, homophobic, and is written with no marginalized people in mind. And this woman actually started a mob at the woman who wrote The Black Witch because of this. So the whole thing about this book, the whole premise about this book is that the main character is bigoted. In fact, she is sort of created as the straw man of a Trump supporter. So she's racist, and her grandparents, her grandfather is a misogynist, and he's like, why are you going to school? You're a woman. You shouldn't be going to school. And it's in some kind of magical land, but she wants to become a sorceress or something like that, a witch. She's supposed to be gentle, apothecary, who loves the violin, but she's pretty mean, selfish, entitled, homophobic, and racist. So she's supposed to be an evil person in the beginning, or not the greatest person. She's supposed to be not the greatest person in the beginning. This is a story of a person who goes on a journey, kind of a terrible person going on a journey, and becomes a better person in the end, because she goes through some stuff. And so it's not really that different than, say, A Christmas Carol, where you've got Scrooge, who's a dick at the beginning, and then he becomes less of a dick at the end, and many, many other stories. In fact, that's what most of us in the creative community call character development, is you can't start out with a good character who only becomes gooder. Usually in a story, if a character is bad, and then they become good, if the story goes past them becoming good, then it kind of just circles back around and they become bad again. There's nothing interesting to the general public to watch a good character who's just good not change at all. And based on what I've heard from about this book, this is actually leftist. It follows leftist ideas. Go through all of the small details on this when I do a longer video about this. But this character is a leftist idea of what a Trump supporter is in every single way that I can recall. And she goes through this thing and realizes, oh, that's a crappy way to be. I'm going to be a better person, blah, 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 blah. There's something at the end, too, where she makes some comment off to the side that's the trigger warning, homophobia. You can't just, so this gets really mad about homophobia because this female character goes, you can't be this way. You just can't. You have to change. When she doesn't agree with homosexuality. So because this character doesn't fit how the reader wants life to be, maybe this character doesn't like homosexuals, maybe this character is very uncomfortable around homosexuals, even 350 pages in, she goes, this is the worst garbage ever. Guess what? Some people just are uncomfortable. That's fine. You can't, this reminds me of when I was doing a puppet class, puppetry and the puppets in the community class in college. I know, right? And we went to a school and we were working with kids to create puppet shows in our groups. And so in our group, we made our villain, Misbehavior. So in my group at the school, we made our character Misbehavior. These kids were like 7 or 8 or 9. They were very young. And so while we were writing the script for our puppet show, Misbehavior said, shut up. And the kids were like, oh my gosh, you can't say shut up. That's mean. And I was like, this is the bad guy. She can say shut up because it's not desirable behavior. And we have to have one undesirable behavior in order to differentiate them from the good guys. Because if Misbehavior just said, excuse me, please be quiet, you really wouldn't know what's wrong with them. That's not really a bad guy at all. And so they didn't really get the idea of a bad guy actually misbehaving, and the fact that this character was Misbehavior and doing bad things. They actually were like, oh no, you can't do that. But even past bad guys doing bad things, you can have characters, even your protagonist, who has their own biases, or who has their own weakness, or who has their own things that they have to work through. I don't know if The Black Witch is a series. It's YA, so I haven't really looked into it a whole lot. I don't read a bunch of YA. But if they were setting this up to have more, you can fix one character flaw. You're not going to fix all character flaws. I know, 350 pages in the book, you should be fixing almost everything. But characters and people will always have character flaws. You can become less biased and go, oh, I can get over this thing. I see where I was wrong in that, while you're still uncomfortable with this other thing. Fixing one character flaw doesn't automatically mean that you're better at everything. And so this person saw this nasty character in this book and decided it was the worst, most dangerous and offensive book ever, because watching this character have biases and eventually go, oh, I'm doing things wrong, I should treat people better, was so offensive because she didn't believe in people acting this way. Because she doesn't believe that books should be published with characters who are jerks. As I don't know if she would have the same issue if the character was not a main character. But this book is about a human transforming their personality. And she whipped up a huge media frenzy. Like I said, she whipped up a huge social media frenzy. She didn't like that the protagonist was a flawed person. And that would have given publishers with moral clauses in their contracts the right to dismiss this book. And these things can happen before the book is even published. Because you write the book, you get the book out, it gets advanced reader copies, reviews go out, and imagine that this woman is advanced reading your work so that it can get some reviews to pick up some steam, and she decides that she hates it. So she goes onto Twitter And she contacts all of the news agencies that she can to say, this book is trash and this person is trash because this is what they write. And so then you lose your book deal that you've been working months on because an advanced reader didn't like that your protagonist was imperfect. This is dangerous. This is allowing the writing community, not even the writing community, this is allowing the big five, the publishers and the agents, to decide what you are allowed to believe and how you are allowed to act, period. This is letting them decide how you're allowed to write, what you're allowed to write about, and going farther past sensitivity readers. Because sensitivity readers can freak out and say, I don't like how that's done, blah, 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 and a publisher would still be like, well, if you don't change that, we are not going to publish it. That's going too far. This is going even farther, where you don't have to be you don't have to be guilty of anything. Just if somebody doesn't like what you've written and they go on Twitter and throw a fit and get you a bunch of negative publicity, you're done. If somebody sees you at an event that they don't like, they can go on Twitter, report it. You're done. This is dangerous. This is giving corporations moral authority over individuals, and this is censorship. Writers need to stay strong with staying on their mark, telling their stories, and living their lives. Every day that I see more stuff like this happening to traditional publishing, it just makes small publishing and independent publishing look better. So far, the only benefit I see to publishing traditionally is having the assisted marketing. But at some point, when they're censoring this much, that's not even going to be enough when you can find assistance with marketing. The big five are going to kill themselves if they keep this up, because writers are going to stop turning to publishers who try to control their behavior, control their thoughts, and determine every facet of their life based on accusations that are whipped into a frenzy on social media.